Do you hear me all right? Okay. All right. Before we get started, what is different about this lesson than most lessons that we study?
It's not a review.
Ha! He hit it right on the nose. Exactly the same things that I was thinking. Well, that was the question I wrote up here. What was the difference about this lesson? And you know, most generally, lessons 13 is a review of all the Sunday school, all the memory verses, or a review over the whole quarterly. Well, and you know, I was telling Paul this morning, I'm a little bit drawn back when it's a review. It's hard to study for a review. You know, I don't know. Maybe other people don't have trouble with that, but a review is hard for me to teach. A review. There's so much to cover and one thing and another, and I was rather happy to find out that this is a regular lesson, so hopefully we can get something good out of this. Lesson number 13, instead of a review, it is the title of the lesson is the Fall of Jericho. The Fall of Jericho. Let's look at our memory verse here, Hebrews, which is in the New Testament, and the Fall of Jericho happened in the Old Testament, but Hebrews is bringing out, the writer of Hebrews is bringing out things about some of the things that happened in the Old Testament. And so let's read this. By faith, it's impossible to please God without faith. So this is by faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they were compassed about 7 days. By faith. Keep that in the back of your mind. It wasn't the vibration of the noise. They probably didn't even know how sound traveled back then. They might have, but I kind of doubt it. But you know how sound is a wave, you know, and the higher the pitch, the shorter the waves, or longer one of the waves. I don't know exactly how it is, and the lower the sound, the wider the waves are, whichever way it is, but there's different wave depths in tones of sound. But that's not what caused the walls of Jericho to fall. So I think we're going to kind of run into that here a little later on. It was by faith. This is what the writer of Hebrews says. It was by faith. And it was having the faith that the walls was going to fall, but it was also following what God had planned for them, and that everything had to be carried out just the way God told them to carry it out, in the very exact way. You know, well, we'll get into that. I'm gonna stop with that. I've rambled enough on that. I'm going to read the junior emphasis here. The Israelites were now in Canaan. Boy, they finally reached it. But the accomplishment is not done yet. They've got things to do yet. The Lord had promised to give them this land. They were camped by Jericho, a large city with high, strong walls around it. Now, why was they camped at Jericho? Because when they got to the Jordan River, and they crossed the Jordan River, God told them, says, well, I want you to cross right here. And I mean, we read last week how miraculously God provided them a way across the Jordan River. And so why is Jericho the first city? Well, that's the first one they come to. I mean, it's just geographically, that's it, you know. God does not move Jericho somewhere else so that they can have something else to attack first, you know. But, you know, as you come to them, that's how it's going to be. They were camped in by Jericho, a large city with high, strong walls around it. But one thing had already taken place. The spies had already studied this thing out. They had already went in and spied this land out. Now, I'm sure these spies probably had conjured up in their mind, how are we going to take this? Well, let's see, we could do this, we could do that. They probably had all kinds of procedures that they were thinking, but you know, God had a plan. God had a plan that they probably never even thought of, and that was to knock the walls down. And so, but they, you know, any strategic aggressions like that, people always has plans. And you know, there's probably several different plans, just like going to war or something. You know, this person's probably got this idea, and this one's got this one, and this one's got this one, and this one. And you know, you might take some good from this one, and some good from this one, and some good to this one, and put it together, and it's a work of a cooperation. But you know, when we're following God, it's we follow God. He's already got the good out of all of them, all the plans. God has one plan. And it's the best plan. Let me just stop with that. It's the best plan. He knows exactly how it's going to be. And how many, I think two of the spies, I think there was only two spies. Did either one of them spies think so? Well, God's just going to knock the walls down and that's it. No, that probably didn't even enter their mind, you know, but that's how it happened then. Manna had ceased now. They were not eating of manna anymore. In this lesson, they were starting to eat of the fruit that was in the land there, and so I'm gonna expound a little bit more on manna. Was manna ever fed to people before the children of Israel was in the land? Never reported. Nobody knew what it was. Because what is the definition of manna, Sister Bayless? What is it? I knew she knew that, so that's the reason why I picked on it. But, you know, they didn't know what it was. They had no idea what it was, you know, but that's what they feasted on for 40 years. And to my knowledge, manna has never came since that I have any knowledge of. And it was a thing that God provided for them at that time. And so let's go into reading here. We got some lengthy reading here. And it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and he looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Art thou for us or for our adversaries? Let's stop right there. Joshua was told 2 or 3 lessons ago to do what? Let's just go back and look at that. I'm gonna make sure I quote this right. 3 times he was told, be strong and of good courage. Do you think he's displaying that right here? He sees a guy over there, and you know, God told me at least 3 times, be strong and of good courage. I'm going to go over and investigate and see what's going on over there. Not knowing who it was. No, not whatsoever. Let's take up there at verse 14. And he said, Nay. Now this is the person talking to Joshua. And he said, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. And can you imagine, I'm going to stop right there then. Can you imagine what Joshua, oh my, okay. What does he do? And Joshua fell on his face to the ground and did worship and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? Okay, he realized that, okay, I've got someone on my side here that's higher than me. He outranks me. He outranks me big time. And here I mistook him as maybe even being an adversary. But I see that I've got the general in front of me. It's kind of what he's saying. And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, I've got this underlined here now, this next little phrase here. Loose thy shoes from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. Have you ever heard that before? That kind of rings a bell, doesn't it? Remember when at the burning bush, Moses was at the burning bush, tending sheep of all things, working for his father-in-law. He sees a bush burning, and he goes, oh, well, you know, he doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to it at first, but it just keeps burning, keeps burning, keeps burning, keeps burning. And, I know that's not a candle over there. Let me go and investigate. And what happens? A voice comes out and says, Moses, Moses, take off your shoes, for you're on holy ground. Here, the successor of Moses is getting the same, am I saying that's the right successor? Is getting the same message from the same commander. The way I feel is the same commander, which is, I think this was the Son of God myself. I believe this was the Son of God. Because did you notice what it said here? Joshua, on verse 14 there, and Joshua fell on his face to worship, fell on his face to the earth and did worship. Now, if that would have been just an angel, I don't believe an angel would have let him worship him. You know, we're not to worship angels. Angels are holy beings. Yes, I know. But we are too. And we don't want no one worshiping us. And so I feel like that this was the Son of God. For the place whereon thou standest is holy. And Joshua did so. In other words, he took his shoe off. At least one shoe, probably both of them, I think. And realized and gave God the reverence. And gave the Son of God reverence because of this. Now we change chapters there, Joshua 6 and 1. Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out and none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thy hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. The Lord is telling Joshua, see this great city here? I've given it to you. It's going to be yours. I've already given it to you. Jericho, excuse me. Jericho was a mighty city. Jericho was a walled city. Jericho was a place, if it was going to be attacked by someone, you would want to be inside that city, other than the children of Israel attacked in it. If it was another tribe from another place, Jericho would probably been a pretty safe place to be. It was stout. It was strong. It had men that knew how to fight. It had king that knew how to strategically work his army in a way that this was a pretty safe city. And Joshua knew this. The children of Israel knew this. And you know, we ourselves, as we look at trials that comes to us, sometimes they seem like they're mountains. Sure. Most of the time, shall I say 100% of the time? Most of the time, that's right, you know. They are mountains, you know. How am I going to get over this, you know? Lord, you have to take control. Well, that's what he's doing here. We have to be, like Joshua, strong and courageous to be able to follow God, let him be our general, let him be our leader, and follow him, whether, as the song says, whithersoever he goes. We might think, well, if we go this way, it'd be a whole lot easier, you know. But maybe God wants to go right this way, you know. And you know, if God says go this way, then we better be right with Him, because that's the right way. That's the strategic way to go with God. I can't say that word very good. I hope you can catch what I'm saying. But that's the way to go. God has all the planned, and nothing is left out. Not one thing. However, we have to do exactly what He tells us. And we're going to find out here in this lesson that they had to do exactly what God told them. Let me read the junior book commentary on these verses that I just read. The angel of the Lord appears to Joshua. When Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked. He saw a man standing with a sword in his hand. What was this? Joshua asked himself, art thou for us or for our adversaries? You know, I'm sure he had his sword drawn. He's ready. He says, okay, who are you? You know. And Joshua asked. And then the person, he said he was captain of the host, or the army of the Lord. Oh, when Joshua knew that, it changed his perspective altogether, didn't he? He wasn't going to fight that. There's no way to fight that. And Joshua was smart enough to figure that out. He fell on his face to the earth and did worship. You know, and that's what we've got to do. You know, when the trial gets tough and when it looks like no other way, we better be down on our knees talking to the Lord, because He's got all the answers. He's got all the answers. Seems bleak sometimes for us, but He's got all the answers. He was ready to do anything the angel said. Now, he says the angel, but I'm taking it as really being the Son of God. Was this angel Jesus? He asks. And I agree with that. It says he must have been, for he let Joshua worship him. It was wrong to worship angels. He told Joshua to take off his shoes, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. This reminds us, as I already mentioned, of Moses meeting God at the burning bush. It was holy because why? God was there. That's the reason. Reverence was given to God because of that, not because of the earth that it consumed. That's not what it was. This earth is earthly, you know, but it was because God was there. God is heavenly. The Lord promised to give Jericho. Jericho was straightly shut up, tightly shut up, I think is what that word means. Gates shut and locked. And then He's got ETC, which means any other thing, barred up, whatever they could do to protect them against them adversaries that are outside that they call children of Israel. That's what they were talking about. But you know, their adversary was also God. That's right. And so they were doomed. And it said earlier in the reading before this that their hearts just melted. They knew that God was on their side, and they knew how they had crossed the Red Sea, how they had crossed the Jordan River, and how God had provided for them for 40 years, that their hearts was just melted. I think that's what Rahab even told the two spies. Said, these guys in here, their hearts just melting, you know, because they've seen what has happened. They have seen the great crowds of Israelites crossing the river in the camp. They knew how God had helped Israel. They were afraid. The Lord told Joshua, see, I have given into thy hand Jericho. There wasn't no question in what the Lord was telling Joshua. Well, you know, if everything works just right, why, God might give it to you. No, God's given it to you. God has given it to you. His kings and His soldiers and His men of valor and anybody else, anything else, guards, anything, God has given it. God's taken care of it. But yet this wall's still standing. What Joshua do? He believed him. Be strong and of good courage. Sound like God's give a plan. God gave a plan for them. Let's go to verse 8. And it came to pass, wait a minute. In between these verses, between 2 and 8, is God was giving the plan at how to do that. Okay, what was the plan? Okay, in a brief summary of it, they were to march around the city once the first day. And there was a certain way that they were to march. These men was here. I think it was a bunch, some soldiers, and then priest, and then a priest with the ark, and then soldiers behind, I believe is the way it was. So anyway, there was a certain way that God told them. And I want you to march around that one time on day one. And don't say a word. I think the horns blowed, I think, while they were marching, but don't say a word. Don't say a word. Don't want no nonsense, no blabbing and yakking, but pay attention, just walk around. On day 2, do the same thing. And so on for 6 days. Do it once and then go back. And then on the 7th day, he said, you're going to go around it 7 times. And when Joshua gives the sound, that's when you're to shout. But you're supposed to keep your mouth shut for 6 days there, walking around there. Okay, that's kind of a brief deal on that. So let's look at verse 8. And it came to pass when Joshua had spoken unto the people that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horn passed on before the Lord and blew with the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. And the armed men went before the priest that blew with the trumpets, and the rewarder came after the ark, the priest going on and blowing with the trumpets. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, Ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice. You know, God was okay with the trumpets blowing. I don't know why he wanted the trumpets to blow, but you know, it's okay for the trumpet. But keep your mouth shut. You know.
Maybe to intimidate them.
Yeah, it could be intimidation. Yeah, could have been. But certain people, we as people, keep our mouth shut. That was the command that was given here. I keep my mouth shut. If somebody, and I got to thinking about this this morning. Say the guy standing right beside you is about to step in a hole. You better keep your mouth shut. Hope that he don't, and probably the Lord will protect him anyway, because you never hear anybody that stepped in a hole and broke his leg or anything. But God takes care of the things that we might conjure up in our mind what might happen, Let's go ahead and read this here. Let's verse 10. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, Ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth, until the day I bid you shout, then shall ye shout. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going about it once, and they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. That was the first day right there. Lodged in the camp. As I was reading this also, Joshua says, don't let any word come out of your mouth. But then the day when I say shout, I want you to shout. How many times do we want to open our mouth when we're supposed to keep it shut? And I'm talking about me. I'm not blaming this on you. I'm not saying I'm talking about me. How many times do I want to open my mouth when the Lord tells me to keep it shut, and then when it comes time to open my mouth, I'm going to take full ownership, then I want to keep my mouth shut. You all may not have a problem with that, but I have to stay on top of that. I have to stay on top. Well, pray for me, congregation. Pray for me there. But, I think that's kind of human nature. And it's just like growing up in a family. Dad says don't do something, that's the very thing you want to do. And then he tells you, go do your chores. Well, how many wants to go do the chores? No, I'd rather go play, you know. You know, that's, I'm going to leave it at that then. Marching around Jericho, the Lord told Joshua how to do. He told him how to do it. This is the way it's going to be. He didn't say that you have to do it this way. Joshua already knew that. He gave him the plan. He said, I want you to do it this way. And Joshua knew then that it had to be done that way. The Israelites were to go around Jericho once a day for 6 days. The seventh day, they should go around 7 times. Okay, if they go around 6 days, and then day 7 they go around, then it looks like one of those days they went around on the Sabbath day, didn't they? They had to, you know. Well, that's against the law to work on the Sabbath day to you know, there's 7 days journey, you know. But you know, when God tells you to do something and it's truly from God, we better do it, because He isn't in traditions. He's in leadings. He's not in just traditions. And when God told him to do that, that's the way we better do it. The 7th day, they should go around 7 times. Now I wonder if that day was the Sabbath. It could have been. Might not have been, but whatever. 1, 7 priests and 7 trumpets passed on before the Lord and blew the trumpets. 2, the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed the 7 priests. Priests carried the ark. The ark was the main part of the possession. Did you get that? The ark was the main part of the possession. Why do you say that? Because that was God. And if you go in without God, you're doomed already. And that's the reason why the commentator says that he was the main part of the possession. It held the law of God, and so it represented God. Number 3, armed men or soldiers marched in front and behind. That is, some went before the priest and some followed the ark. Therefore, the possession was 1, soldiers; 2, 7 priests blowing trumpets; 3, the ark; 4, more soldiers. That's how they lined up. What if they'd put the ark first? Man, let God go first. Well, you know, God needs to be in the lead, you know. It wouldn't have worked in this case. God had a plan for each and everything. And you know, that's exactly. There was to be no shout, no noise of the voice. They were not to utter a word. When Joshua would tell them to shout, then they should say a shout. Can you imagine they got back to after the first day, they got back to the camp? Joshua never did say shout. I never did hear Joshua say shout. Did you? No, I didn't either. Well, nobody else must either, because they didn't shout either. So, second day, they done the same thing. Got back to camp and thought, I never heard Joshua shout again. Say shout, you know. But you know, maybe they knew, maybe they didn't know. And I assume that they really didn't know I don't think Joshua told exactly how it's going to happen. Even if Joshua knew completely how it's going to happen, and he might not even know completely how it was. But you know, there's some things that we don't need to tell all. Sure. You know, everything, because sometimes it kind of gets us in trouble. Now we need to tell what God leads us to tell, you know. And sometimes it may be a little more than what we might think we ought to tell, but if God's behind it, we better tell it then, you know. But you know, what is it? A fool tells all? Isn't that what it says in Psalms there somewhere? A fool tells all, and you know, a lot of times that does happen there. When Joshua would tell them to shout, then they would shout. The first day they marched around or compassed the city once and came back to camp. For 6 days they did the same, once each day. They were to go under God's command and God's way. Only God's way. And all of God's way. And that's how it is with our life today. Is we only go in God's command. We only do what God tells us to do. But we do all of what God tells us to do is what's very important. Okay, let's go to verse 14. And the second day they compassed the city once and returned to 2 camps. So they did 6 days. Do you think people were thinking, I don't quite understand this? That's okay. It's not wrong to not understand something if you don't understand it. You know, there's lots of things I don't understand about the Bible. And, I try to dig in and learn, and all, but I don't say, oh, that's not anything for me because I don't understand it. No, it might one of these days open up and boom, there it is. Well, how come I didn't see that before? Have you ever had that happen? How come I didn't see that before? It's so simple now, And but that's the way this went. And it came to pass on the 7th. Remember now, God won't always answer prayer the first minute you ask. I'm going to stop right here on that reading. As soon as you ask, God does not say, okay, it's granted to you right now. Unless you all have a main line to God more than I do, because sometimes God holds things up just a little bit. And I think it's for our good. Let me back up. I know it's for our good because that's what builds patience. That's what builds consistency, is consistently asking God, am I not praising you enough, Lord? I need to praise you more, Dan. Help me to draw closer to you because I'm not getting this answered quite, it's being slowed up. It won't be because of God, it'll be because of me. That's what it'll be. Help me to draw closer to you. And so, this is kind of what happened here. So they did this 6 days in verse 15 there. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they rose early about the dawning of the day and compassed the city after the same manner, only this time 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. If they thought walking around at once was a job, I don't know how big that city was. Was it a mile around it? Was it 4 miles around it? I don't know. But I'm assuming that it was at least a mile. Now, I don't have any inkling of any reference back to that, but that's kind of what Much larger. Yes, okay, Brother Bailey says it's much larger than that. Okay, if it's just a mile, that means it's a quarter square. Quarter of a mile square. Well, that's not very, very big. So I tend to think that it was more than a mile. So I'm going to agree with Brother Bayless on this, that it was much larger than that. But they went around it, one time. Whew, that was quite a little trip, wasn't it? So, well, that's what God commanded. But the 7th day, they go around 7 times. Okay, that's at least 7 miles, see, and even more, according to what we agree to, probably quite a little bit more than that. That'd take them quite a little while to get around. I think you can walk just about 3 miles an hour. Marching is probably a little bit slower. I would say that's a little slower, maybe about that. But, it's going to take a little while to get around there, see. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. Verse 16, and it came to pass on the 7th time when the priests blew with the trumpets, Joshua said unto the people, shout, for the Lord have given you the city. The seventh time on the seventh day, Joshua finally says, shout. What'd they do? They shouted. They didn't hold their peace then, because Joshua told them, says, when you hear me say shout, shout. Well, the closest one to Joshua heard them first, and they started shouting, and as it went out, they shouted, shout, for the Lord have given you the city. The walls ain't come down yet. How do you know that, Joshua? You know, people could conjure up. How does he know that? The walls hasn't come down yet. But you know, Joshua was, be strong. And what did it say? Be strong and of good courage. Is that what he says? Be strong and of good courage. Have faith. People had to have the faith also. Shout, for the walls are coming. When the marching ended on the seventh day, they rose early when the march ended. On the seventh day, that's a new sentence, they rose early. How about the dawning of the day? They had much to do. They compassed the city 7 times. And then Joshua ordered, shout, for the Lord had given you the city. They shouted, a great shout. The trumpets blew. Now the people had finished their part. They had obeyed God. Noise could not bring down that wall. It was so thick that Rahab's house was built on it. And it was so thick that the noise would not have brought that wall down. It had to be the hand of God. Yeah. To conquer a obstacle in our Christian life, temptation, trials, whatever it is, it's not our noise that will conquer it. It's God's hand that will conquer it. It is not us. We cannot conquer nothing. But with God, we can conquer everything. And it's not us that's conquering, but it's God that's doing the conquering. In between these verses here, God had given them and told them that the city was accursed. Only Rahab and her family, whoever was in that house that had hid the spies, her and her family was the only thing that was only people, including the animals, the only people that was going to be, that's the only live thing that was going to be survived Jericho. Rahab and her family inside the house. Now she probably had family outside the house and they probably lost their lives. But if they were inside that house, how was they to know what her house was? Well, you remember that cord that they let the spies down? She was to hang that into the window there, and they would know, okay, there's that scarlet cord, let's let that alone. God has protected that house there. She had to have faith in God also. True. And if you will fast forward, she's part of the lineage of Jesus Christ. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? God knew what he was doing here. Here she was protecting the spies. Only Rahab and the people that was in her house was saved. No silver, no gold, no iron, no brass, no nothing was to be taken out of the city for yourself. The things that was taken out of the city, this was gold and brass and iron and silver and all that, was to be taken into the tabernacle, because the temple wasn't built yet, but the tabernacle. That's what it was for. That was God's. You not to touch it. Don't take any cattle. Oh yeah, there's a fine grand champion sheep over there. You better kill it. Because you remember, later on, Saul got in trouble because he was keeping the best, you know. Grand champion sheep over there. Kill it, get rid of it, God says. Yeah, but what about, oh, there's some nice people over there. What does God say? Kill it. Kill it. Get rid of it. Yeah, but the king, what does he say? Kill it. You get the idea? Get rid of it. Get rid of it. There's Rahab. Okay, she's fine. I've already made amends for her. You know that. You know that. That's scarlet. You know it. But everything else, annihilate it. That sounds harsh, don't it? But you know, trials in our life, let me say another thing, tribulations in our life, temptations in our life looks good, doesn't it? Or they wouldn't be tempting, would they? Temptations look good. They look like that grand champion sheep, you know. But God says get rid of it because it's going to hinder you later on, and He wants to annihilate it, get it out of the. We want to follow God. Yeah, that might look good to us, but God says get rid of it, and if we don't, we're going to be in a world of hurt. Joshua 6:20. So the people shouted when the priests blew with their trumpets, and it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people shouted with a loud shout, that the walls fell down, not part way, not stacked up, but flat. You know, if it's something's flat, that means you can get over it. You know, if it's a bunch of rubble piled up, yeah, you might be able to get over it, but when it's flat, that means you can go right on in, can't you? So that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. They shouted, the wall was standing right there, they shouted. The guy that was over here, the wall was right there, he shouted. The guy that's over here, the wall was right in front of him, he shouted. When it all fell down, they went in. All in one accord, more or less. Straight before him, and they took the city. Let me stop right there, and let's go back to the memory verse there. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they had compassed about 7 days. By faith. It took Joshua's faith. It took this guy's faith. It took that guy's faith. It took that guy's faith. But they had faith that the walls was going to fall. And that's what brought it down, was God's work, because they had faith in Him. It was nothing that they'd done. It was all what God done, but it was because they followed God is the reason why. You know, we can be thankful that God has a way for each and every one of us. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, young, babies and old people that couldn't even move hardly, and ox and sheep and ass with the edge of the sword. Annihilated it all. Got rid of all of it. It was another great miracle. They had seen miracles out in the wilderness. But you know, at this time it was a miracle that was needed. Isn't that the way trials, tribulations, things that obstruct us? It is at the time, that's what we need. That's what we need right now at the time, is deliverance in God's hand work for us. As we go along, you know, each trial we face one by one. You know, you hear the old cliche in football or baseball or whatever. we take it one game at a time. You know, you've heard that. We focus on this game right here because that's our very next game. We focus on it. And then when we win that one, then we focus on this one. You know, well, that's the same way it is with trials, tribulations, obstacles that gets in our way. We focus on that one right here. Then God leads us through that one, and you know, things might go real good. But you know, we never turn our back on God and say, oh, well, I'm doing real good. I don't have to read my Bible. I don't have to pray because everything's going real good. As soon as that happens, you're going to fall in a pitfall. You're going to fall in mire, you know. But then, you know, just give it time. If you don't think you have enough trials, you know, just give it a time. You'll have another one. Does anybody have not enough trials? I don't think I can get a hand over that. You know, we had no volunteers for not having enough trials, not having enough tribulations, not have, you know. But you know, we take them one at a time, one at a time. And you know, we can also look back and think, well, God led me through this trial. And you know, He worked in a mysteriously way, in a miraculous way. It was a miracle how He brought me through this trial. And I know God can get me through the next one. However way He wants to choose to do it, I know He can do it. And you know, this was their problem right now, was the walls of Jericho. They destroyed everything, killed both people, animals. Only Rahab and her family members were saved alive because she believed and helped the spies. She wasn't saved just because God liked her, you know. God's no respecter of persons. She did it because she believed in God. You mean this woman, probably the less likely person you would pick to be what God wanted her to be. But she was the one. She was the one because she followed God, not because she was special or godlike. But she helped the spies. The silver, gold, brass, iron were saved to put into God's house. The Lord had worked because people had faith in Him and obeyed Him. Now that's the point right there. We don't have God on a string. We don't have Him as a puppet on a string and, oh, I'm in trouble, God, help me out right now. Yeah, but how did you treat me yesterday? How did you treat me last year? How did you treat me? You know, no. God's got us in a voluntary way. God asks us to follow Him, and we put our trust and our focus on Him, our full dependence upon Him, and He'll take care of it. The Lord had worked because people had faith in Him and obeyed Him. That's two things that we have to mix in our batter, is faith in Him and obeying Him. If we leave out one of those ingredients, we're in a world of hurt. Why did God have the people killed? They were wicked people. The Israelites would have learned wicked ways from them. In addition, Jericho was a type of sin. As Jericho was all destroyed, so sin must be destroyed out of our lives. Not just some of the sin, not just most of the sin, and not just 99 and 44 100% of sin, but 100% of the sin out of our lives. As Israel believed and obeyed God, so must we believe and obey Him. As He threw down those walls, so will He break sin's power over us. He will protect us from all evil and harm. But you must believe and obey Him. I want to read one more thing here. To conquer in the Christian life, we need God in us, leading us and directing us. We cannot win not one battle on our own.
We are very dependent on Him. And like I said, He has to lead us. He wants to lead us. He has to direct us. He wants to direct us. And He wants to be in us. He has to be in us too. And He wants to be in us. And if we will allow Him to take full charge, we don't have a problem. We don't have a problem. God will lead us through. I got one more thing here. I got COI. Can you imagine what COI stands for? I wrote that down here. Children of Israel. That's pretty easy, isn't it? The children of Israel needed that ark with them. Now, they couldn't experience that ark in them. Now, how are you going to put an ark inside you, you know? That would be kind of hard to do. Just think, the rod was in there and the Ten Commandments and all. You couldn't be in them. But you know, that's how come we live in this dispensation of time. We can have the ark in us. What are you talking about? We can have God in us. Right. Not just with us, but in us. Aren't we blessed? Amen. Aren't we blessed? I am so happy that God is the ruler of my life. And you know, I want to serve God to the fullest ability. It's like working. I want to be able to do everything that's required of me. And if I've got extra time to help somebody, you know. And that happens a lot of times. Because sometimes I get behind and I expect help from other people. I kind of expect it, but you know, it's my job. And you know, when I get help, I appreciate it. And you know, that's the same way. God is leading me. God is leading us each and every day. And we need to be thankful to Him for every. I don't care if it's a little. We might think it's after we go through a trial a lot of time, we'll look back and we'll think, well, you know, that was a small trial, but always think at the time it was this big, you know. You know, we may look back and we think, oh, you know, a little trial like that. But at the time, it was this big. And, you know, we need to thank God for what we might consider just little trials. We need to thank God for that also. Thank God for the big ones. Thank God. But one thing we have to do, we need God in us, leading us, and directing us. And we need to follow Him and obey Him and have faith in Him in order to get anything accomplished that He will accomplish through us. So we got a new quarterly next Sunday, so everybody be prepared for next Sunday then.